This is Terms of Reference. I'm your host, Stephen Laddick. Kyle Schutter is the founder and managing director of Takamoto Biogas. Kyle believes that energy is the foundation for all development and improvement of quality of life, and he saw a great opportunity to provide modern, sustainable energy to people with no or limited access to modern energy in Africa. An engineer from Brown University, Kyle has a wealth of expertise from having researched biogas in Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Ghana, and the USA since 2009. He registered his first company in 2011, constructing individual biogas systems for small-scale farmers in rural Kenya. After 2 years of operations, Kyle invented the Takamoto Pay-As-You-Go Biogas business model and technology to enable more people to access renewable energy without the high startup cost. As an industry leader, he is regularly sought out for the development of complex biogas systems. Kyle has received the Enjuba Young Entrepreneur Award, Heinberg Social&nbsp Award, received special recognition from the Sankalp Africa Summit in 2014, and took second place in the William James Foundation Business Plan Competition. He has lived in Kenya since 2011 and continues to search for innovative solutions to provide sustainable, modern energy for rural communities. I spoke with Kyle in Nairobi, Kenya. Hi, Kyle. Welcome to Terms of Reference. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Hi, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
Tell me what it is that you do at Takamoto Gas. What's your role in the company? What is your day-to-day like? Tell us about that.
Well, I'm the managing director. I founded the company about 3 years ago. My job is to come up with ideas, do problem solving, and kind of solve half the problem and then find people who can solve the other half of the problem, whatever it is, whatever concept we come up with. What can I say? My day-to-day can vary so much. I could say there's one day where you would have found me about knee-deep in cow dung in our backyard because there was a biogas system in our backyard we were testing, and of course I wasn't quite ready for the field, and one of the pipes burst, and I guess if I can't clean up the stuff myself, how can I expect my employees to do it? So just join in the fun, I guess. So that's one day. Other days are more relaxed or more stressful, for sure.
Take us back to the beginning. Can you give me an overview of what exactly does Takamoto Gas provide for the listeners who have never heard of you before, and how to get started? Like, what was the sort of inspiration behind it?
Yeah, so our company provides biogas, methane gas for cooking for farmers. We install a tank that farmers put their cow dung in, and that naturally occurring bacteria produces gas, which then is piped to the house for cooking. And the innovation that we've come up with is we don't charge the customer upfront for the system. We charge them for the gas they use. So that means that they don't have as high upfront cost. Instead, they're paying for the gas just as they would normally pay for it as they use it. So that's been an innovation, and we've had a lot of success with that. We're the first ones, as far as I'm aware of, in the world doing that. I started this company 3 years ago. Well, I started thinking about this idea maybe 4 years ago. I was in university. I always wanted to get a PhD to study biofuels because I thought biofuels are so cool. There's these little machines that reproduce themselves, that make this fuel, and at some point in time we're going to run out of fuel. We'll need some other alternative, and biofuels seems really cool. And I want to be researching that and then build a company to do that. And then I took a class on something that we ended up coming with a project that was related to biogas. And the project was going to be based in Nigeria at the time, and of all crazy places. One of the people in the project was from there. And I thought, well, I could either go get my PhD where I know what I'll be doing for the next 5 to 7 years. I know the kind of pipetting and the research work I'll be doing. Or I could actually try to start this company in Nigeria, and I have no idea what I'll be doing even 5 months from now. And then when I posed the question that way, it became totally obvious what I had to do, even though I had zero money and zero experience. But luckily I had next to zero fear. So now I'm in Kenya. I'm not in Nigeria, so I really did have no idea what I'd be doing in 5 months. I never actually made it to Nigeria. I went to Ghana, which was nearby, for an internship. Didn't work out very well. I started traveling around to different countries and to figure out what kind of waste streams people had and how we could turn that into energy if there was an opportunity there, if there was a failure of the market.
How did you go from, a guy with an idea, $0, sitting in, traveling around Ghana and hoping to get to Nigeria? How'd you get there? Where was the seed money? How did you get that first project going?
So I saved $5,000 from when I was in high school mowing lawns, which I hadn't used in college. And then I pitched at a business plan competition, and I was like, I'm going to go to Nigeria. I'm going to start this company and all this stuff. And they're like, okay, have you ever been to Nigeria before? I'm like, no. Like, okay, how much is it going to cost to start this company? I'm like, $1 million, thinking that I was going to get some seed money from this business plan competition.
Sure.
And they're like, all right. So maybe it's a big surprise to you, but we didn't win. But someone in the audience thought what we were doing was really cool. And some anonymous person donated $5,000. So I had $10,000 to start off with, which actually doesn't go all that far, but it lasted me about 9 months. And most of that was probably in plane tickets and whatnot. But to get where we are now, geez. So I had that money. I had like $3,000 left. I started working with a business partner in Kenya. And the first business didn't really work out that well. Actually, I think I've gone through about 4 businesses so far. We've started 4 different companies. And this is the 4th one. This one's actually seemed like it's going to work pretty well. But a lot of speed bumps along the way, for sure. Won a little bit of money at a business plan competition. Got a little bit of investment from family and friends, around $80,000. Started installing systems to generate some revenue as well. And then, it just picks up slowly. Got a Gates grant for $100K and a World Bank grant for $25, and got a little more investment, a little more revenue, and then, slowly build a team. At some point, it was just me.
This business today, the 4th iteration, we'll call it. How close are you to sustainability? For paying your, you can answer this or not. Are you paying yourself? Are your staff getting paid? Are people mostly volunteer? Like, where are you at in the sustainability arc?
We're getting really close. One of the big days for me is the month where we have a positive. We make some money that month. That'll be the month that'll be really exciting. We haven't had that month yet, but we're getting pretty close. We've got 11 full-time employees, and I think our costs are around $6,000 a month, typically. So people are getting paid, not a lot.
So people are getting paid, and most of the revenue from your installations at this point, is it just cost recovery? They're covering for the installations or those kinds of things, or that's part of the revenue arc. I know your business model is pay for the gas as you go, and we'll install the equipment. Is that panning out? Is that playing out so far?
Yeah, it is. It turns out there's a huge demand for a product like what we're offering, that people had flexible payments, very little risk to them. They didn't have to worry about the system not working or working, because we made sure it actually worked, because if it didn't work, then they weren't going to use the gas, and so we'd be out of luck. So we had a lot of demand for that. In the beginning, we had all kinds of challenges with revenue. Sometimes it was the technology failed early on. Some metering had problems.
Tell me about that. Like, what kind of technology failures? I saw on, I was reading through the Takamoto website and through some of your background information that you've evolved your systems from the clay installations to
plastic.
The plastic installation. Thank you for the word. Tell me about that failure. How did that? Was that like version 1.0 was the clay installation, and that wasn't working out? Wasn't you weren't able to turn it around? Or tell us about that.
Yeah. So I went to this business plan competition about 2 years ago, and it was called William James Foundation Business Plan Competition, and it was really eye-opening because they had a lot of mentors there. And so I pitched on this idea. We had these masonry biogas systems that took about 45 days to install. And I got all this feedback, and I realized afterwards that we had 2 big problems. One, we were doing this completely unscalable because 45 days to install was really long. There had to be a faster way to do it because, it was just a real pain in the butt. And then the next problem was financing. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense for customers to finance this themselves. because I could access the financing much more easily than they could, I should take the risk because I'm the one installing this thing. I should prove to them that it works. Because we had, maybe 38 installations in the first year, but it really didn't seem like it was like picking up. It wasn't like a hockey stick kind of thing. So it was really eye-opening at that point. We realized we need to have modular systems that, one, we can install quickly. So now we can install the systems in half a day. And they need to have, we need to have centralized quality control. We also need to be able to remove the system if the customer doesn't pay. So a masonry system, of course, that'd be a real pain to remove that. It'd take, 45 days to install and another 45 to remove it. Yeah, and then the other one was we need to be able to give flexible payments. And it made sense to charge people for what they use. And then once they've paid a certain amount, then they can own the system. But to make it flexible according to, 1 month, you have a lot of money, you can cook more. Another month, you have less money, everything is a little bit less that month. And that's just kind of the way cash flow works for farmers. So then we developed a metering system that metered out gas. People paid for as much as they could afford. And then, you could either buy a day's worth at a time or 30 days or 60 days or as much as you wanted, But it was up to you to decide.
How big is biogas? Give us a sense of the market in not only in Kenya, but also sort of Africa and the world.
So in Asia, there's millions of biogas systems installed, millions, tens of millions probably. And the technology's been around forever. In fact, biogas itself is a naturally occurring kind of thing. It's been around longer than humans. We've just learned how to capture it in the last 50 to 100 years. But in Africa, even though it has a huge potential to make a big impact on people's lives, the upfront cost is really prohibitive. Because a bag of cement costs 3 times as much here as it would in Asia. And the governments don't quite have the same kind of money to subsidize programs like they have in India and China and Nepal. So it hasn't taken off the same way. I would say there's less than 50,000 biogas systems in all of Africa. So that's kind of the market. There's a lot of biogas systems in Europe, in the U.S. as well. But the cost of energy is so high here that we actually sell the gas for much more than what gas would cost in the U.S. But it's actually a good deal for customers because otherwise their alternative is something even more expensive. So it's interesting that we actually can make this a viable business by actually selling it for more than gas costs in the U.S. or Europe. But at the same time, it being viable for a customer as well.
And so it sounds like the market in Asia is dependent upon those masonry installations. Is that right?
Yeah, generally, they've generally done those masonry installations. They're now moving more to some plastic installations as well. Our supplier of biogas systems they're manufactured in China. Surprise, surprise. Everything's from there, right?
Oh, sure. China's big in Africa, right? In general.
Mm-hmm.
Is Asia, is there a connection? I've got to ask now, where did the name Takamoto come from?
This might sound a little weird. I was trying to convince my then girlfriend to name our future son some Japanese last name because I thought they sounded so cool, like Matsuzaki and, Suzuki, something like that. And she completely refused, obviously.
That is fantastic. Okay, yeah, keep
going. And but I was obsessed with the way these names sound because they just sound so great, Something about like a 4-syllable word and emphasis in the first and third syllable. Anyway, so I had my own company. I figured I could name it whatever I want. And so that's what I did. And also it roughly means fire from waste in Swahili. But more, it was just the way it rolled off the tongue that I liked.
So it kind of sounds Asian, but in Swahili it has kind of a meaning. It just all worked out.
Yeah, exactly. I got my cake and I ate it too.
That's fantastic. How do your customers find you? Are you out there? Do you have it sounds like, I don't mean this in a negative way, but there's a little bit of hand to mouth, right, going on in your business. You're still growing. You're still trying to find a way to grow. Do you have a concerted marketing push? Do you have people out there in the field, ringing the bell, or how does it work?
Yeah, good question. I'd say my first customer, that was interesting. I actually went to dairy association meetings and I went and I presented, and there was a guy I met on the bus up there. So these tiny, tiny buses they're like 14-seater buses with 22 people in them. He was in the bus. He's like, "Oh, that's really cool what you're doing." I was like, "Okay, cool." And then I was like, "Oh, I need a translator." So he translated for me, and at this dairy meeting. And then I said, "Does anyone have any questions?" And one guy raises his hand and says, "Yes, I filled out all of your paperwork. When can I get a biogas system?" So that was the first biogas system I sold. It was really ad hoc. And since then, we just kind of gone on the field, talked to a few people. They talked to their friends, and we actually, in the first 2 months of rolling out our Pay-As-You-Go Biogas, our unique business model, we had more customers than we really could possibly handle. And this was just in one village. We were only within a 10-kilometer radius. And that was really great. It was great to have more demand than we could supply for. But the next thing is being able to supply for that. So that we had 50 installations in the first 2.5 months. It is, there's not a whole lot of marketing that was required, to be honest, quite yet. Hopefully no one else, not too many competitors are listening right now and they'll get the same idea. But
the reason you were having an issue, I mean, first of all, congratulations. It's great to hear that, it's always inspiring when you sort of have that first customer, then word of mouth helps you to spread it and you find that there's really significant demand. Were you were unable to service them because, you just weren't expecting that kind of demand? You couldn't import the materials fast enough? A combination of that?
Two things. So financing is a big part of our business. So we have to be able to get the financing to be able to install the system for a customer. Because we're basically taking the risk, and no bank was willing to lend us the money with all the uncertainties in our technology. Yeah, so each system cost us, at the time, around $1,500 to install because we weren't really doing it at scale. So it cost us a lot of money to install each one. Now it's about half that. So that, you can see that it costs, to install 100 systems we've installed to date, costs us around $150,000. So it might not sound like a lot of money to some people, but of course, for us, that's a good chunk of change. And then the other thing was the technology. We rolled out a meter no one had ever used before. We built it ourselves, and there was all kinds of interesting challenges with that. Communicating by SMS, by text message with the meter. It was powered by solar panels. There's a lot of small pieces there.
Tell me about that a little bit. It sounds like an innovation other people would like to hear about. So you've built a meter that, as it's obviously tracking the gas, it sends you an SMS when a particular amount has been reached, or is it like a daily blast? Or
yeah, so it can work in two ways. It can either work by SMS or by keypad. So what happens is someone pays by mobile money, which is a very common way to pay in Kenya. And we send the meter a code saying top up for a certain amount. Then the credit on the meter runs down until it gets to zero, and then it cuts out the gas, so the customer has to top up again. And the customer's warned that if you keep using, you're running out of gas, so top up again soon. And the other way it can work, so areas without a mobile network connection, we can send the customer a code to their phone, so wherever they have a network connection, when they go to their house, and they type in the code in the meter, and then the gas flows. And once the credit runs out, then the valve shuts off, and the customer has to top up again.
What was the development time behind that? Are you a developer yourself, a coder, or did you hire people? Are you using an open source system? Or
we hired people for the job, actually. Yeah, so we kind of came up with the concept, and then there's right now there's some guys in the Netherlands. This is really a flat world, connecting with people all over the world on this. You in Costa Rica and China, whatever. Yeah, so someone else built the actual hardware and software. I don't know too much about that stuff.
Okay. Going down that path, sort of, you're a biomedical engineer. That's what your sort of background is. What sort of R&D do you and your team do? You said that part of your day is coming up with solving half the problem and then sending it to other people. Mm-hmm. Tell us about what some of the innovations you're working on. How does that R&D work?
I'd say almost every aspect of our business we've had to invent in some way. What's the right payment plan for people? How is this meter going to work? How's the piping going to work? At one point, we had 3% of our gas leaking out of the pipes for various reasons, because it was either done badly or we had the wrong connections or whatever. and now it's down to 0.5%. So that's a big improvement.
Yeah.
And so it's just doing things like that. There was traditionally not a whole lot of money in this kind of business, and traditionally companies didn't care too much how well their system worked in the long term because they made their cash up front. But for us, we make our cash on an ongoing basis. So we have to make sure the customer is really satisfied. So for me, I think it's very fulfilling. It's a good thing, and I'm glad we have that alignment of interests between us and the customer so that they're not getting ripped off. So traditionally, people didn't care too much about R&D because if it didn't work, then the customer would figure out how to deal with it, and I'll install a new system somewhere else for someone else.
How has that relationship management worked thus far? Have you had instances where you've had to remove the installation?
The instances where we've had to remove it so far, there are very few. There's like 3 out of 106 we removed. One, the customer wasn't using the product. Another time, there was technology problems. I'm sorry to say, or sad to say that it was actually our fault, and they were frustrated, and they were like, we don't really want this, and so, well, fine, we removed it. But luckily, they hadn't lost too much money on the investment, or because they hadn't made an investment, really. Yeah.
And what was the third one? So you said there was 3, and there's
Can't remember what the third one was. I think someone else was not using very much gas as well.
Okay.
But,
what kind of customer relationship challenges do you have? You said that there's clearly a communication challenge, and that there's new technology and a new service. Is it really new technology in that people have just never seen a biogas system before in their lives? What other types of customer service challenges do you find yourself having?
Well, actually, people have seen biogas systems before. It was something that was for rich people before, and almost everyone knows about it, but very few people could afford it. So luckily, we had that awareness before we even started. The challenges we've had, it's interesting. I mean, communication challenges are always big, and our guys in the field are Kenyan and from that area, so speaking the same language culturally and literally the same language is very important. Because there's some things that really baffle me. People were using a lot of gas. I couldn't really figure out why, and then because I realized that the flame was kind of like wrapping around the pot. So there's a natural gas flame wrapping around the pot. That's because when you cook with firewood, that's what you do. The flame kind of wraps around the pot. And so that was something that we had to, do some training on and say, look, you really don't need to just use this much gas. You can make your gas last longer if you do it a little bit differently. I mean, that was one challenge. What else? Right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was just going to say, it sounds like your field staff they're clearly your interface between you and your customer. How hard has it been to find those qualified individuals who can install systems, who can explain the technology, who can be patient and listen to the customer, those kinds of things?
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say it's been, it's not too hard. I guess because we found people who can do the job very well. I think in Kenya, we're blessed, we're lucky to have generally a very strong workforce. I think people in other countries also recognize that. In Kenya, people they're definitely very hardworking. We've also developed a good way of hiring people. So people apply in an online platform. They fill out a survey with some quiz questions, and then we can very quickly sort through many people because unemployment here, around 50% or so. So a lot of people are applying for jobs. So it's a bit hectic to sort through, 500 resumes, which we might get. So instead, we have some quizzes, and we can narrow it down to like 20 people pretty quickly. And then from there, we can hire. So it hasn't been too much of a challenge, but like I said, we only have 11 people in the company. So I've been involved with all the hiring so far, so it makes it easier.
Mm-hmm. What do you think that your ability to scale is? Is it a matter of investment? Is it just sort of making sure that you're continuing to have successes in signing up new customers, or would you really prefer to have that, as you said in the beginning, here's that $1 million so that you could really scale quickly and realize efficiencies and those kinds of things?
I think giving a startup company too much money too early is a very dangerous thing because you end up spending on whatever you think is the right answer, but you're almost always wrong in the beginning in some way, and you have to slightly tweak that as you go along. And so if you're limited, constrained by cash, I think that's a pretty good thing. As frustrating as it can be, along the way, I can see where I would have dumped a lot of money into one thing if I had the money to do it, but I didn't because I didn't have the money, and it turned out I was in the wrong thing to put money into. In terms of scale, I mean, I think right now we're doing most aspects of the value chain, installing and monitoring payments and finding the financing and doing the R&D. But I think in the future, we want to be a metering company. If someone wants to use our product, then that's great. We can meter the gas for them. Whatever country they're in, we can help them with that. And I think that's how it can really reach scale, because there's really millions of potential customers in East Africa alone. And for me, we want to make this as big as we can. And really, I mean, energy is like the most important, the most fundamental thing to living a modern lifestyle. Energy use is highly correlated with GDP. So GDP and energy use is tiny compared to the U.S. If you think about Kenya versus the U.S. And I think that having energy is so fundamental, because with energy, you don't have to worry about getting sick because you can boil your water. With energy, you don't have to go collect firewood. It's just lights right from your stove. You can save time. You can study more. A better life. And so energy is so fundamental that's where I decided I wanted to focus.
Reading between the lines there, when you graduated, you said you were looking for this challenge or a challenge similar to this, and you said, look, I can go do the PhD and have that that path, or I can make the jump. Why the for-profit model? Why not the not-for-profit model? Was there a conscious decision there to say this one's better than the other?
Yeah, there was. I think there are some things that it's suitable to be nonprofit, but I like the idea of for-profit because it aligns interests so well. I can give you a few examples. I'm sure you've seen them yourself, or the listeners have seen these examples as well. But for example, when I was in Ghana, I was visiting a village, and they installed, or a nonprofit had installed a water pumping system and a distribution network to the whole village. So they were pumping water from the river, and it was going up to the village. But no one asked the people in the village if the river flooded, and it does. So when I went there, we could actually paddle around the pumping station because it was completely submerged in water.
Oh, God.
Because it was a very poor line. Yeah, very classic. Then no one asked the people what was going on here. And the people didn't have any incentive to say anything because they're like, well, we want a pump, and we're not going to cause any problems here because we want it for free. So that's the kind of thing I want to avoid. And the happiest day for me, and one of the happiest days will be the day I can deliver a profit to our investors. That'll be amazing, because with the kind of company we have, it's very rare to find a social enterprise that actually delivers a profit. It's very hard to make money, as it turns out. I thought completely differently when I was in school. I was like, oh, this must be so easy, everyone's doing it. But it's really difficult. And it's really difficult to do it when you're doing something completely new and novel. And it's really difficult if you're a starry-eyed person wanting to make a social impact, and you miss all of the small details of what it actually takes to make something that works at scale. It makes a huge impact. For me, I want to incentivize me and my investors and everyone, my employees, that the better we do our job, the better it is for us as well. As in, we'll make more profit, and everyone will be able to live a more successful and pleasant life, and then invest money in the next thing, whatever the next thing is. If I want to leave this, or my employee wants to leave and go do something else and start something else, then they should have the money to go do it. So I think it creates a virtuous cycle.
You said in the beginning that this was money out of your pocket. You were the original investor, but now it sounds like you've diluted a little bit. Do you have a portfolio of investors at this stage?
Yeah, we do. We have a number of investors and some employees as well that came on early for the low market pay.
Okay, interesting. And was there a minimum buy, or do you have a balance sheet now that is taking you through the next couple of years, or can you still see the end of the tunnel as far as funding?
Well, we'll always need a lot of funding, or need to partner with finance organizations to provide financing for our systems, of course. So that's just part of the business we're in. I think we'll definitely go through probably another round of raising investment, planning on that early next year for Series A. But we want to do that once we've really proved that we can actually be profitable. So profit first, then raise the next round of investment to scale up that profit.
And so you right now, the way that your revenue is growing and the way that your installations are growing, you can see that, you can sort of chart it that by X date this year, there's profitabilities in sight.
Mm-hmm.
That's exciting.
Exactly. Yeah, very much in sight.
How have you changed as a person? As you just said, you sort of came to this. I'm assuming you were talking about yourself, sort of as a starry-eyed individual, looking to change the world when you graduated, and then you got on an airplane and thought you were going to Nigeria, but ended up in Kenya. How does this change you? What was looking back? How are you different?
I mean, some of the early books that inspired me were books like 3 Cups of Tea and Mountains Beyond Mountains that many people have read. And there, it's just, it's kind of the more beautiful side of all this, but the more difficult side is that it is really tough to make money. You do have to make tough decisions. Not everyone's going to be happy with you. And I was kind of a nice guy, but nice guys finish last. Sometimes you have to let people go. Sometimes it could be the hardest things to do. But you have to think about the bigger picture. And if you don't make this happen, if you don't make budget cuts, or you don't find someone who's better for this job, then there'll be thousands or maybe millions of farmers who won't have biogas because I wasn't able to bring my company to scale. Seeing that side. The other thing I've learned a lot about is learning to let go of things and learning to delegate to other people. It's kind of a management thing, but also just some decisions I don't know the best answer for them, and to find someone who does. So I can bring something halfway, but it's also good to let go at some point and say, this other person knows how to bring it the rest of the way.
And delegation, what can you remember a moment, or has there just been a series of moments where you said, I've got to outsource this, or I've got to give this to somebody else to do?
Mm-hmm. I remember in the very beginning, I did everything. I filed my own taxes, and in Kenya that means standing in line in 3 different places every month for about half a day. And so I was so busy I couldn't hire anyone, and I realized I just have to stop. I have to hire someone, so I hired someone for like $100 a month to go and stand in line and file taxes for me and stuff like that. And at that point, I think my rent was around $50 a month. I was staying in Kibera, a slum, which was a very, very nice experience, actually. But it was very, very expensive. $100 a month is a lot of money to me. But it probably, doing all those things saved the company for sure, because there was no way that you can do everything. And have enough energy at the end of the day to think about what to do the next day and what the vision's supposed to be. Are
you able to have a life outside of Takamoto right now?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's it.
Okay, I live at the office and all that. But yeah, I do, of course.
Okay. And have you adopted Kenya as sort of your new home?
Yeah, it's a great place to live. I hope you come and visit sometime. It's really wonderful here. We'll see. The government is not so happy that the U.S. Is involved in trying the president here for crimes against humanity. But so they're making immigration a little bit more difficult. But I think we'll still manage.
When you say immigration, are you planning on? Does that deal with your residency status? Or are you planning on?
Yeah, with work permits and things like that.
Okay, excellent. How hard is it to start a business in Kenya?
Well, I mean, you can hire a lawyer to file all the paperwork. Of course, the banking is not quite what it is in the U.S., but it's better than some places.
Not necessarily overly daunting, but you just have to be willing to survive the system?
You know what? I have nothing to compare it to. I've only ever started a company in Kenya, a couple of companies in Kenya, so I couldn't compare it to anywhere else. So I imagine it's probably challenging other places. So a friend of mine told me it took him 2 hours to register a company in Delaware. It took me a month to register in Kenya. So there's that difference. But I really couldn't say from experience.
Speaking of keeping track of I'm going to say maybe your classmates or your friends from the States or around the world, obviously. Do you use them as your resource? Are they those the people that you call on in that extended network to help you solve problems? And sort of following on from that, do you find yourself comparing experiences about starting companies and leadership and what it takes to actually get one of these things off the ground?
Yeah, well, not many of my friends from college have started companies, but it's hard to compare notes really because it's a world of difference. But they are definitely a shoulder to cry on sometimes, or to tell stories, and that was definitely part of the plan, was to start something where I could have a lot of stories to tell, and certainly I do. One of the things I hope to do in starting this company, and I hope I can make it successful, plan to, is that I hope I can inspire other people to consider an alternative to getting a PhD or an alternative to working at a management consulting company after school. The people you really can, with no money and no experience and a lot of passion, you can start something. Whatever it is, you can do it. So I hope I can inspire more people to, take that track. There's a lot of problems out there to solve, and it's really fun too. I've had a lot of sleepless nights and sleepless weeks, but in the end, it's really worth it because I'm in control of my life. I'm my own boss. And anyway, I hope other people can also take on this lifestyle.
Tell me, what's the one that you tell? When you either come back to the States or you're traveling or somebody bumps into you or you're at a conference and, you want to wrap the Takamoto experience into one story. What's the one that you tell?
It depends so much on context. Are we drinking a beer or are we drinking a coffee?
I prefer beer.
So, there's so many. So my first business partner, we're working together. I went to the U.S. for a business conference, and I came back to Kenya. The day I get back, I get a phone call from him, and he says, Kyle, I need $2,000. I'm like, well, what do you need $2,000 for? He says, well, there's been a miscommunication. I don't want to go to jail. And I'm like, all right. And by this point, I'm a little bit nervous with the guy because he'd done a couple of other things, and we were on the fritz anyway. And this was kind of the last straw. And I say, sorry, you have to figure this one out on your own. He pleads for a while. I say, no, got to figure this one out. So I call him the next day. I said, let's call him Roger. Roger, how did everything go? And he says, so I can't really talk right now, but my bail is $200. I'm like, oh gosh. So apparently, while I was gone, he'd taken up a project for a convent, and they'd given him some deposit to get started. But instead of starting that work, he'd started another project, and that guy hadn't paid him yet to do his project. So now he couldn't actually finish the first project. So he was actually taken to the police station by a priest because he delayed so long in getting this job done, and they'd already put the money down for the thing. So that's why he went to jail.
Wow. So, unfortunately, a classic situation of, paying for one contract with another, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But,
So, yeah. So we stopped working together, and I invested a little bit of money in that company, and I was just like, no, let me just cut my losses and run.
One of the things that we have as a part of every interview here on Entrepreneur is trying to find out what kinds of tools and technology that you've used to be successful. Are there any specific technologies that you use other than obviously, we're using Skype right now for this conversation?
Mm-hmm.
Are there any tools or technology that you find absolutely essential to communicate with your staff, to make yourself more efficient, to, you just wouldn't be able to live without, that's made the difference for Takamoto to be successful today?
I would say there's one that stands out above all the other ones, and that's Dropbox. There's a lot of companies like them, but Dropbox is, I think, the most important. There's one time our office was robbed at gunpoint. I was actually here. And they took a bunch of computers. This is also a funny story. They stole the beer I had in the fridge. They stole my half-eaten container of banana yogurt. But the thing was, the next day, we had our computers insured. We had Dropbox. We went to the store, bought new computers, and then loaded Dropbox. And 5 hours later, it was like nothing ever happened.
So that's been essential just for basically company continuity. That's one of your risk prevention systems.
Yeah. It was like it really could have killed us. All of our files being stolen and stuff like that. But yeah, it worked out. I mean, I can also say we use Asana for keeping track for task management between employees, which works very well. Of course, using Google Drive as a CRM for a lot of stuff.
Do you still find as well that there's a lot of sort of pencil on paper work for you and your staff in the field? Not relying on sort of the high tech solutions.
Yeah, there definitely is. All the forms are paper right now. You go to the field. We've looked at other options, but it becomes very complicated, and things can go wrong, and the mobile networks aren't that great.
My last question for you. This has been a fantastic conversation. I like to end every interview with asking how. You've said this in a number of different ways throughout the interview, but you took the leap in a way that a lot of people, I think, would find scary, for lack of a better word. You graduated, you said, you had very little funding, and you said, I'm just going to jump, I'm going over to Africa, and I'm doing it. You've managed to carve out your space, you've found something that you're passionate about, and you're moving it forward. What advice would you give to another person who is either, a new professional or maybe somebody who's a midterm professional who's in the development business or interested in international development or humanitarian aid? What's your sage advice for them about either how to get started in doing this or how to sort of take the bull by the horns?
I wish I had some very clear inspiration for people there. I don't know. I mean, what inspired me was just to think about all the opportunity I had that I didn't even know what I would learn if I did it. And that's kind of the way I approach most things in life. Well, should I talk to this girl or not? Well, if I don't talk to her, I know exactly what's going to happen. I'm not going to know anything about her. And if I do, anything could happen. Maybe I'll marry her. And so I just try to take that approach with everything. And the world, there's so much possibility out there in the world. And I hope that I can inspire other people to think what the world of possibility is for them out there. And practically, it's very tough. Have a great support network. I certainly do. My family is hugely supportive, and I'm not sure how I'd be able to make it without them. My sister's even involved in the day-to-day operations of the business. My parents are so supportive. They're not worried that I'm not really putting any money into my pension fund yet. And so, just get people around you because it's a long, hard journey, and you'll need the support. And a few times you'll need to be like, I really need to borrow some money. My roommate's also an entrepreneur doing a different business, and he's like, Kyle, I need $2,000. I'm like, well, dude, I don't have $2,000, but why don't you just ask friends? He's like, oh yeah. So he goes on Facebook and then messages a bunch of people, and by the end of the night, he's put together $1,000 in one night to help him register a business and pay for some of his employees that he would have to let go otherwise. So and those people around you are so important. And I think you realize it even more. You appreciate them even more when you're starting something, and then things and times get tough.
Yeah, I'm gonna break my rule. One more question. And maybe I didn't ask this because, or we may have passed over this simply because it's just a given. How important are social networks and social network technologies for your business and in Kenya in general? I mean, the obvious sort of thing is everyone on Facebook? Does Takamoto rely on its Facebook page to connect with customers and those kinds of things, or?
Not yet. No, very few of our customers actually have Facebook. But it's very big in Kenya. Everyone my age has a Facebook account for sure, no matter where you are. But our customers typically aren't 26-year-olds. What else in social media is important? It's been very important connecting with people back home and just kind of keeping up interest. We raised some Kickstarter funds for various things. But on the whole, it's not a make or break kind of thing.
Kyle, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure thinking about all these things and speaking with you. Come to Kenya sometime.
Absolutely.
You've been listening to Terms of Reference, a weekly podcast from aidpreneur.com. Find us on iTunes or at www.aidpreneur.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.